I still remember the day as if it was carved into my memory, a day that shattered everything I thought I knew about love and loyalty. My heart raced as I watched him, the man who once held my dreams in his hands, choose someone else over me. Not just anyone, but another woman he was willing to leave me behind for. The sun was setting outside our window, casting a soft glow across the room, the kind that always made me feel safe. I had poured so much into this relationship, believing that it was unbreakable, that we were each other's forever. We'd been through so much, overcome so many obstacles, or so I thought. But that evening, in a single conversation, he unraveled everything we had built together, word by word. It started subtly, a few changes in his behavior. He was distracted, distant in ways that made my chest tighten with unspoken fears. But I brushed it off, telling myself it was nothing. After all, people go through phases, don't they? Maybe work was stressing him out, or maybe he just needed some space. I thought I was being understanding, loving even. But in reality, I was walking blindly into the worst heartbreak of my life. When he finally sat me down, his words were calm, almost practiced, like he'd rehearsed them 1,000 times. He told me he had fallen in love with someone else, someone who made him feel alive in ways he couldn't explain. I remember sitting there, frozen, unable to speak as he confessed everything, each word like a stone sinking into the pit of my stomach. And then he told me the unthinkable, that he wanted to marry her. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. Marry? My heart dropped as the reality of his words hit me. This wasn't just a fling, a passing moment of weakness. This was real. Something he was willing to abandon me for. My mind reeled, trying to understand how the man I had loved, trusted, and built my life around could make a decision so callous, so final. In that moment, a part of me shattered beyond repair. I felt like a stranger in my own life, as if everything I had ever known, every promise he had ever made, had been a lie. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't recognize, some mix of guilt and pity that only deepened the wound in my chest. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to make him see what he was doing, but no words came, only silence. A silence filled with all the unspoken dreams and promises we had once shared. And then, as if nothing more needed to be said, he stood up and walked out, leaving me alone in the quiet of our home. I sat there, staring at the empty space he left behind, feeling the weight of his betrayal settle over me like a heavy fog. The reality of his choice tore through me, leaving a hollow ache that I couldn't escape. In that instant, I knew that the life I had so carefully built was over. I was left with nothing but the broken pieces of a love that no longer existed. As I sat there, a cold, numbing feeling spread through me, a sense of emptiness that I couldn't shake. I realized that the man I had loved was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. And I was left alone, heartbroken and adrift, trying to find a way to survive the pain of his betrayal. The days that followed felt like a blur, each one bleeding into the next, colored only by the dull ache of abandonment that had taken root inside me. I woke up every morning, hoping it had all been a terrible nightmare, that I'd roll over and see him beside me, reassuring me that we were still us. But each time, I was met only with the cold emptiness of our bed, a stark reminder that he had chosen someone else, leaving me alone in a life that now felt foreign and hollow. I tried to go through the motions, wake up, get dressed, pretend to eat, even though every bite felt like swallowing broken glass. I forced myself to go to work, to smile at people, to act like everything was fine. But every glance in the mirror revealed the truth. I was barely holding myself together, a shell of the woman I had once been. At night, the silence of our empty home wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket, each quiet moment echoing with memories of a life I could no longer call my own. I found myself revisiting old photos, replaying the happy moments we'd shared. Birthdays, vacations, even lazy Sundays spent doing nothing at all. They all seemed like fragments of a dream that had slipped through my fingers. How could he have been so close, so intertwined with my heart, and now, nothing? I remember one particular night, sitting on the floor of our bedroom, surrounded by these memories. I picked up a picture from our anniversary, our smiles bright and carefree, eyes full of promises we never doubted. I wanted to tear it apart, to scream, to release the anger that was building up inside me, but I couldn't. I just sat there, numb, feeling like I was drowning in the weight of everything we had once been. As the weeks passed, I became a ghost in my own life, drifting through each day with a sense of hopelessness that I couldn't shake. Friends reached out, tried to comfort me, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. How could they understand the emptiness that had taken over my heart? How could anyone? They all said the same things. You'll move on. Time heals. But I couldn't believe it. My life had been shattered, and I didn't see how I could ever piece it back together. But as broken as I felt, there was a small, stubborn part of me that refused to give in completely. Somewhere deep down, a quiet voice whispered that I had to survive this, that there was a way forward, even if I couldn't see it yet. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to listen to that voice, to cling to the fragile hope it offered. It started with small steps, barely noticeable at first. I would take a walk around the block, just to feel the sun on my skin, to remind myself that I was still alive. I started journaling, pouring my feelings onto the page, giving voice to the pain that had been bottled up inside. It was messy, raw, and unfiltered, but in those moments I felt a tiny spark of release. And as I wrote, I realized that I wasn't just grieving the loss of him. I was grieving the loss of the person I had been, the woman who had believed so deeply in love, in forever. That woman was gone, replaced by someone scarred and changed by betrayal. I didn't know who I was anymore, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stay trapped in the past. I had to find a way to move forward, even if it meant stepping into a life that felt foreign, uncertain. This journey wouldn't be easy. I knew that much. But as I closed my journal and looked around the quiet, empty room, I felt a small glimmer of strength I hadn't known was there. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new, something that could help me rebuild the pieces of my broken heart. And for the first time since he left, I felt a faint, tentative hope that perhaps I could learn to be whole again, even if I had to start from scratch. As days turned into weeks, the fragile hope that I had started to feel grew ever so slightly, like the first shoots of a plant breaking through winter's hard soil. I wasn't healed. No, I was still far from it. But I had reached a point where I couldn't stand to see myself in this endless cycle of pain and sadness. I needed a way out, a new direction, anything to help me move forward. One evening, on a whim, I decided to try something I hadn't done in years. I joined a local art class. Painting had always been a quiet passion of mine, something I'd put aside in favor of building a life that revolved around him. Now, with nothing left to hold on to, I felt drawn to it again, as if it might help me find pieces of myself that I had forgotten. The first day of class was intimidating. I felt out of place, like I was forcing myself into a world I no longer belonged to. But as I held the brush, something shifted. The gentle sweep of colors on the canvas, the flow of paint following my hand, it gave me a sense of peace, a fleeting moment of calm that I hadn't felt in so long. It was as if, with every stroke, I was painting away the remnants of my old self, allowing something new to take form. Over time, that art class became more than just an escape. It became my therapy, a safe space where I could process my emotions without judgment. Each piece I created felt like a step forward, a small but powerful reminder that I was capable of building something beautiful from the pain I carried. And with each passing day, I felt a little bit stronger, a little more whole. Outside of class, I started exploring other things that brought me joy. I tried new recipes, read books I had always been curious about, and even took long walks through the city, letting the sights and sounds ground me in the present. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving, I was living, finding moments of happiness in the small, everyday things I had once taken for granted. But even as I embraced this new path, the memories of him lingered like shadows at the edges of my mind. Sometimes, a familiar song or a passing couple holding hands would bring it all back. The love we once shared, the promises he had made, the future I had envisioned with him. The pain would hit me like a wave, sharp and unexpected, reminding me of everything I had lost. Yet each time that pain resurfaced, I felt a growing resilience within me. I would close my eyes, take a deep breath, and remind myself that I was building something new, something that no one could take away from me. And slowly, those waves of sadness began to lose their power over me, replaced by a quiet strength that grew from within. And then, one evening, when I least expected it, I met someone who would change everything. He was a friend of a friend, introduced at a casual gathering I had reluctantly attended. I hadn't planned on meeting anyone, hadn't even thought I was ready for it. But as we talked, I found myself drawn to his warmth, his kindness, the way he listened with genuine interest, as if he could see beyond the walls I had built around my heart. It felt strange, surreal even, to feel something other than pain, to share laughter with someone who wasn't burdened by my past. And for the first time, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was capable of loving again. Not in the same way, not with the same blind trust, but with a newfound wisdom and a heart that had learned to be resilient. I didn't know where this new path would lead, and I didn't want to rush it. But as I walked home that night, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in months. It was as if I was finally letting go of the past, allowing myself to step forward into a life that was waiting to be discovered. And for the first time since he left, I felt truly alive, like I had been reborn from the ashes of my old self. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions, a delicate dance between excitement and caution. This new person in my life, let's call him Daniel, was everything I never thought I'd find again. There was a gentleness in his presence, a quiet understanding that made me feel safe, as if he somehow knew the pain I had been through without needing me to say a word. We took things slowly, step by step, both of us knowing that I was still healing. Daniel never pushed for more than I was ready to give. Instead, he met me exactly where I was, respecting my boundaries with a patience I hadn't known I needed. Our connection was built on simple moments, coffee dates, long conversations, quiet walks under the stars. Each one felt like a balm for my soul, a reminder that not all love is meant to hurt. I hadn't thought it was possible to feel this way again, to look forward to someone's company, to share laughter that came from a place of joy rather than obligation. With Daniel, there was no pretense, no need to hide the scars that marked my heart. And in his presence, I found myself slowly, carefully, opening up in ways I hadn't allowed myself to in a long time. One evening, as we sat together on a park bench, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, I realized just how far I had come. I looked at him, this man who had entered my life so unexpectedly, and felt a surge of gratitude, a quiet, deep appreciation for the way he had helped me rediscover the parts of myself I had thought were lost forever. But with this newfound happiness came an inevitable fear. The memories of my past still haunted me, casting shadows over the bright moments I was now beginning to embrace. I feared being hurt again, feared opening my heart only to have it shattered once more. It was a fear I couldn't ignore, a voice in the back of my mind reminding me of everything I had been through. I shared this with Daniel one evening, my voice trembling as I admitted my fears. I told him about the pain, the betrayal, the scars that were still so fresh, so raw. And instead of trying to fix it, instead of offering empty reassurances, he simply took my hand and said, "You don't have to rush anything. I'm here, for as long as you need me to be." In that moment, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a sense of peace that I hadn't known was possible. For the first time, I felt seen, understood in a way that went beyond words. And as I looked into his eyes, I knew that this was something different, something real, a love that wasn't built on promises or expectations, but on respect, patience, and trust. And so, I allowed myself to lean into this new chapter, to let the walls around my heart come down, one brick at a time. I didn't know where this journey would take me, didn't know if this love would last forever. But I knew one thing. I was no longer the broken woman I had once been. I was stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. Little did I know, though, that my past was not yet ready to let me go. My ex, the man who had once shattered my heart, would soon reappear in my life, drawn not by regret, but by the sight of a woman he no longer recognized. A woman who had risen from the ashes of her pain and found happiness in a place he thought she'd never reach again. It happened on an ordinary day, the kind of day that had become filled with the gentle warmth and steady rhythm of my new life. Daniel and I had decided to spend the afternoon together, wandering through the city streets, enjoying the simplicity of just being in each other's company. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace, free from the shadows of my past. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. We were standing in line at a small coffee shop, laughing about something silly, when I felt it. A gaze, a presence that sent a chill down my spine. I turned, and there he was. My ex-husband, standing just a few feet away, his eyes locked onto me with an intensity that was both haunting and bewildered. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. In that moment, time seemed to freeze. I saw the shock flicker across his face, followed by a strange mix of confusion and something else. Regret, perhaps, or maybe disbelief. He looked me up and down, as if trying to reconcile the woman standing before him with the one he had left behind. I felt his gaze linger on the happiness that had started to bloom in my eyes, the confidence I now carried. I was no longer the broken, devastated woman he had walked away from. And then his gaze shifted, landing on Daniel, who had his arm around me, his presence calm and steady. I saw a flash of something dark pass through my ex's eyes, a bitter realization that whatever control or hold he once thought he had was gone. Daniel looked at him, meeting his gaze with a quiet strength that spoke volumes, as if to say, "I am here, and she is no longer yours." For a moment, none of us moved, each locked in our own silent understanding of what had changed. My ex looked as if he wanted to say something, to explain himself, to reach out and undo the choices he had made. But he didn't. He just stood there, caught between pride and regret, as if realizing for the first time what he had truly lost. I felt a strange calm wash over me as I looked at him, no longer the woman who had once been shattered by his betrayal. I was stronger now, someone who had built a life that didn't need him, a woman who had found love again, not just in someone else, but in herself. And in that moment, I knew I was free. My ex took a step forward, his mouth opening as if to speak, but I didn't need to hear whatever he had to say. His regret, his realization, it was too little, too late. I gave him a nod, a silent goodbye, and turned back to Daniel, who looked at me with a soft, understanding smile. Without a word, he took my hand, and together we walked away, leaving my ex behind, standing alone with the weight of his own choices. As we left, I felt an overwhelming sense of closure, a peace that had eluded me for so long. I realized that I no longer needed an apology, an explanation, or a second chance. My past was exactly where it belonged. Behind me, a chapter I had closed, a story that no longer defined who I was. And as we walked hand in hand down the street, I felt the future open before me, vast and filled with possibility. I had been broken, yes, but I had been reborn, stronger and wiser, ready to live a life that was truly mine. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on everything that had led me to this moment, the heartbreak, the loneliness, the nights I had spent questioning my own worth. I had been through so much, and yet here I was, standing tall, stronger than I had ever been. Meeting my ex that day had been the final chapter in a story I had once thought would never end, and now, with that chapter closed, I was free to write a new one that was entirely my own. Daniel was a big part of this new chapter. But it wasn't just about him. It was about me, rediscovering who I was outside of any relationship, outside of anyone else's expectations. I wanted to reclaim all the dreams I had put aside, all the passions I had buried, thinking they were less important than keeping someone else happy. It was time to bring those parts of myself back to life. One morning, as I sat with a cup of tea, watching the sunrise, I made a decision. I would dedicate myself to living fully, to embracing every moment, every opportunity with the courage and joy I had once thought were gone. I wanted to build a life that would be fulfilling, no matter who was by my side. And so I began to take steps toward that life, little by little, one choice at a time. I took up painting again, filling canvas after canvas with colors that reflected the fire within me, the resilience I had discovered. I found myself creating pieces that were raw, full of emotion, expressions of everything I had survived and everything I was becoming. It was a form of therapy, a way to process all the pain and turn it into something beautiful, something that reminded me of my own strength. And as I poured myself into these creations, I felt a lightness, a peace that I hadn't known in years. The woman I saw in the mirror now was no longer defined by her past or by anyone else's decisions. She was bold, unafraid, and deeply rooted in her own worth. I was no longer the person I had been before, and I realized that this journey had given me a gift a deeper understanding of who I truly was and what I truly deserved. My relationship with Daniel continued to grow, steady and true, but this time it was different. There was no desperation, no need to prove anything. We both respected each other's independence, allowing each other the space to grow as individuals, even as we grew closer together. It felt real, solid, built on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. One evening, as we walked through a quiet park, hand in hand, Daniel looked at me with a gentle smile and said, "I love the woman you are becoming. You're like a phoenix rising from the ashes." His words touched me deeply, filling me with a sense of pride. I had risen from the ashes, transformed by the fire I had walked through, and I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The old me would have feared the future, would have clung to any form of security, desperate to avoid more pain. But now I felt a calm certainty, a trust in myself and in the journey that had brought me here. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time I was okay with that. I was living for myself, guided by my own heart, and that was enough. In the weeks and months that followed, my life began to feel like my own again, filled with a sense of freedom and purpose I hadn't felt in years. The woman I had become was not the same one who had once been left broken-hearted and lost. She was someone who knew her worth, someone who had faced the darkest parts of herself and come out stronger, fiercer, and unbreakable. I continued to paint, each brushstroke a testament to my journey, to the pain I had endured and the strength I had found. My artwork even caught the attention of a local gallery, and they offered me the chance to showcase my pieces. Standing there on opening night, surrounded by friends, family, and people who admired my work, I felt a sense of accomplishment that was mine alone, something no one could ever take away. As I spoke to guests that evening, sharing my story through my art, I realized just how far I had come. I had taken the broken pieces of my life and transformed them into something beautiful, something that could inspire others. I was no longer defined by what had happened to me. I was defined by what I had done with it. Daniel stood by my side that night, his presence a steady, comforting reminder of the love I had found after loss. He didn't need to fill any voids or heal any wounds. I had already done that myself. He was simply there, supporting me, celebrating with me, adding to the happiness I had already built. And that, I realized, was the true essence of love. Not someone completing you, but someone walking beside you as you become whole on your own. And as I looked around the room, filled with people who were there for me, who valued me for who I was, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the journey, for the pain that had once seemed unbearable, but had ultimately brought me to this moment. I understood then that my story wasn't just one of heartbreak. It was a story of resilience, of rebirth, of learning to stand tall on my own 2 feet. I knew there would be more challenges ahead, more highs and lows, but I no longer feared them. I was no longer a prisoner of my past or my fears. I had learned to trust myself, to believe in my own strength, and to embrace the unknown with open arms. And as the evening drew to a close, I took a moment to step outside, breathing in the cool night air. I looked up at the stars, feeling a peace I had once thought impossible. I whispered a silent promise to myself, a promise to keep growing, to keep choosing myself, and to live fully, without fear or regret. This was my life, my journey, and I was ready to embrace it with a heart that was stronger, wiser, and open to all the beauty that lay ahead. As time went on, I began to feel a deep sense of fulfillment that I could never have imagined before. Every choice I made, every step forward felt like a testament to my strength, a declaration that I was in control of my life and my happiness. I no longer looked back with regret or anger. The pain that had once threatened to consume me was now just a part of my story, a chapter that had shaped me but no longer defined me. And as for my ex-husband, he remained a distant memory, a reminder of who I had once been and who I had become. I knew that he had seen me with Daniel, seen the life I was building, and had felt the weight of his own choices. But I felt no desire to reach out to revisit old wounds. I had moved on, and I had found peace in letting go. His regret was his to carry. It no longer had any hold over me. Daniel and I continued to grow together, our relationship rooted in trust, understanding, and the quiet comfort of 2 people who had each learned the value of self-love. There was no pressure to be anything other than who we were, no expectations beyond respect and kindness. Our love was simple, unburdened by the pain of the past, a love that felt like home. I embraced new goals, new dreams, all with a renewed sense of purpose. I traveled to places I had once only dreamed of, wrote stories that reflected my journey, and connected with people who had walked their own difficult paths. My life was no longer about finding someone to complete me. It was about embracing the beauty of my own existence, building a future on my terms. One evening, as I stood on the balcony of a place I had made my own, watching the sun set over the city, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for every hardship, every tear, every moment I had doubted myself. They had all led me here, to a life that was more vibrant, more meaningful than anything I could have imagined. I realized then that true happiness doesn't come from someone else's validation or love. It comes from within, from learning to embrace every part of yourself, from standing tall in your own worth. I had been through fire and emerged stronger, more resilient, more open to the endless possibilities of life. As the stars began to appear in the sky, I took a deep breath, feeling the peace that came from knowing that I was exactly where I was meant to be. I had been reborn, not just from heartbreak, but from the love I had found within myself. And as I stood there, with the world stretched out before me, I knew that my journey was only beginning, that there were still endless horizons to explore, endless dreams to chase. This was my story, a story of loss, resilience, and ultimately a triumphant rediscovery of self. And in that quiet moment, I made a promise to myself to keep choosing joy, to keep embracing life, and to live each day with a heart that was unbreakable, unapologetically open, and ready for whatever lay ahead.